Imagine you're 12 years old. Earlier this week, your dad was sent to jail for the second time in his life. The reason being contrarian political views to the empowered party. You go to bed unsure of what's going to happen tomorrow, the next week. Then, in the middle of the night, you're violently shaken awake by your mother. Musa, Musa, we must go. Confused, you grab some clothes, throw them on, go into a car. Surprised, you see your dad there. You start driving hours. As time passes, everything starts to make sense. Your family has sold their business and their home to escape. They rented a car, and now you're on your way to Kenya. Your father's been bribed out of jail, and you're now at the border. In the dead of the night, you cross a river, and you're apprehended by Kenyan police. Using the last of your remaining money, you bribe the police, saying, please, please, accept us into your country. We have nowhere else to go. And that is the problem we are trying to solve. One second, something else happened. Before you got there, your sister went missing. Something went horribly wrong, and she's in a different refugee camp. That is the problem we're trying to solve. The separation of refugee families. 65 million refugees are in the world right now. 70% of them say that missing family members and reunification is a big deal for them. And so we looked at the existing solutions for this, and we were pretty disappointed in what we found. There's, of course, the UN, which is a tired and ancient pen and paper method. It's cumbersome, slow, doesn't have a lot of effects. Then there's ReFunite, fairly new organization, around 5 years old. They use SMS to reconnect people. You have one person text message in saying, hey, this is me, and you have someone saying, I'm missing this person. They compile it in their database and find matches. There's a problem here, though. It requires phones and it requires connectivity. And for that reason, their user base is pretty small. They have 600,000 people in their system. And so we looked at this and said, there's a gap in this market, and we want to fix it. This is a big issue. And that's how we came up with our idea, ReConnect. ReConnect centers on two different pathways. You have the refugee, and you have someone in a developed country that's already been moved. You see, only 1/3 of refugees live in refugee camps, which means the other 2/3 have access to phones, laptops, Wi-Fi. So you have your first person, the refugee, they're in a camp. And they say, okay, I'm lost. I can't do anything here. I'm pretty powerless. That's where we come in. We basically get information from this refugee and input it into our system. There's two ways. The first way is partner with camps. Every time a refugee enters a camp, their biometric data is taken, their name, and a photo. By directly partnering with camps, we can directly input this data into our database. Of course, the camps can say, nope, we're not going to give you that information. That's okay. We can go direct to the refugee with a laptop and a facilitator, input all the information. Concurrently, while this is going on, you have another family member looking for this person. What they do is pretty simple. They go to our website, and they say, hey, I'm looking for this person. They input information, and by compiling information from the refugee and the family member, we're able to create matches. You select your match, and you're presented with security questions. See, a big deal with refugees is that they're escaping oppressive regimes. They need to be safe. And that's what the security questions do. They work to make sure that the person who you're trying to find and the reason you're doing it is not for nefarious purposes. So as soon as the security questions, if you get a majority of them right, you get the contact information. And there we have it. They've been reconnected. Now the impact of this is absolutely staggering. Not only are we reuniting families, but we're also mitigating the refugee crisis. Let me explain. Musa, the person in the story I started with, is a real person. I talked with him yesterday. He was separated from his sister for 10 years. But through that process, as he was able to find her by luck, he was able to get his sister out of the refugee camps through an extensive process. He was able to reunite with his family, but also get her out of the refugee camps. So not only are we reuniting families, but we're working to make an impact in a big global problem. Now, of course, I wasn't the only one that worked with this. I'd like to invite our team to come here and answer the remaining questions that the judges will have. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. It's a very sensitive issue, and so it's hard to ask critical questions, but I'm going to. So I'm a little confused about the story. Who in that story played what role in your consumer cycle? So like someone has to be somewhere with connectivity, right? So is it Musa after a few years when he's somewhere, or after however long it takes him to get out of a camp to go somewhere and his sister's still in the camp? Or how does that work? I'm a little confused.
So let's start with that story. So Musa's story is just one I use for example, but we can use it. So Musa was able to move from a camp in Kenya and come to Canada. So now at this point, he has connectivity. His sister is still in Kenya with no connectivity.
So for 10 years, she's been in this camp?
I think she was in the camp for around 6 years.
Okay.
But I know 10 years for them to get reunited.
Okay.
And so basically, you have her in the camp, can't do anything. We go to the camp and say, hey, fill out this information. You're separated from your family. And then he'll be over here, and he'll input this information. And so that's basically it. He's over here in Canada, where 2/3 of refugees are. Like I said, only 1/3 of refugees are in camps. So that leaves 2 out of 3, or 67% of people, with the connectivity necessary.
70% of people said that they would support this, right? Or whatever, it's an issue for them. It's a concern. Mm-hmm. It's a concern, but it's not a viable concern that they're going to have to participate in until it becomes like their very personal problem. So what percentage of refugees, or what's the number of refugees right now that would actually be able or needing to find this solution? Like, what's your actual market size there? Do you know?
The actual market size? No, I have no idea how many refugees are actively looking for their family. But I can tell you, of that 65%, 70% say it's a problem.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include the people that have already left the refugee camps. I'm talking about the 65 million in the camps. So I can say easily without that there's 100 million people that could probably benefit from this.
Last question is, how does this make money?
So we're looking at different channels to monetize this. One is to open up or unlock different features in the website that we have, and like charge refugees when a feature is unlocked, which is absolutely revolting, but
at least you acknowledge.
Yeah. So there are 2 other ways that we thought about. One is that Refu Night, what Chris talked about. What they're doing is that they got funding from Omidyar Network, 2.6 million. So that's one channel. And in terms of sustainability of the funding, we thought about the Wikipedia model with donation, basically.
So I would just say this is costing someone money. Like the refugee crisis as a whole is costing a lot of people a lot of money, and if it's something that we can solve and alleviate, then it's better for all economies. I would look very hard at who those people are, whether it's governments, it's the states that support them. I mean, look at current political climate here and conversations on refugee and the negative impact they have, not saying that they do, but looking at the government stance on that currently, if you can solve that problem, then there's probably a way to monetize that through that channel as well.
I have 2 questions, and the first one is, it seems like advertising is a way in which money is made in digital communication. So are there ethnic foods you could be advertising? Can you get some advertisers to pay if you say, oh, we're getting this? Because the people out of the camps presumably are making it in some way or another and are able to be considered consumers of products. So can you sell the refugees something and thereby sell advertising that funds the service? That's a little bit weird as an idea, but.
Yeah, we actually did talk about that
did you?
too. It is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I'm wondering if you might be able to make a claim for being exempt from metrics, because there's so many people in need, and if you help some of them, should you be measured by a denominator of how many, including the whole package of people, so that if you are to get a small fraction of the people in need, would you then be measured by all the relationship between the many people that you could not help?
So there's definitely a question of ROI, but I think that the main thing we wanted to focus on here was solving a big problem, and we'd rather look at something we'd like to think of return on humanity, and we think that's really a big issue in terms of solving that. And so, yeah, we can definitely look at the people we helped, and if we connect people, we have a dedicated user base that would probably donate, honestly. If Wikipedia can raise a lot of money for providing information, for connecting families, I don't see why we could also get money through that route. And so I think to answer the monetization question is that there's definitely a couple different pathways that we could consider. But what's really important to remember is that these people who are refugees have escaped super oppressive regimes. And so if we get them super close to finding their match, and they're at that last step, and then we pull a Match.com and we say, hey, your family member for $5, here you go. We don't want to do that. We don't want to subject them to more hardships than what they've already gone through. And I think that's the key that we want to look at, is we were so focused on the idea of return on humanity as opposed to return on investment.
Last question.
Yeah, so I just want to touch on the feasibility piece of this. So you mentioned that you're going to partner with the refugee camps. So can you kind of talk about how you're going to do that? I imagine if there's 65 million refugees, there's quite a few refugee camps. So how you'll actually reach them, and then you mentioned a facilitator. It's like boots on the ground. So just talk about that a little bit more.
Right, and so definitely the ideal scenario is for us to directly partner with the camp, like I said, and on entrance, use the data they're already collecting. It eliminates man hours, and it could eliminate us having boots on the ground. But of course, refugees, you can't stop someone from talking to refugees. And that's the direct, is we go direct to the refugees and reach out to them and get their information. And then in terms of the domestic front, or here, there's multiple organizations, such as the ACC here in Denver, or Refugee Connect in Cincinnati. Each one of those has 25,000 people. If we go off the 70% figure, which I don't know if that applies directly, so then you have people that are looking for people, and we can directly partner with them and say, hey, are you missing your family? Sign up here, we can help you. And that's how we can get that critical mass and go up to scale.